backyard. There you go. Still
We,
working in development of brand yard, and now we are looking at new ground up projects in Phoenix and around Phoenix. We're happy that you're here, and for the next 15, 20 minutes, the stage is all yours. Please, if you have anything to share, if you have anything to ask, it's all us.
are you the general partner in the syndication?
I am, yes.
How many limiteds do you have?
How many what?
Limited partners do you have?
I want to say in this one we have about close to 15.
That's the maximum without doing a filing, right?
We did file.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah.
And what kind
If
of
I-
returns, do you offer? Is it cash flow? Is it based on, future selling, building up equity?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm glad you asked that question because this is where I was not able to invest in a few syndications myself as a passive when I learned about syndications, because majority of syndications that I was looking at had all the returns coming in or presented after the sale of the asset. I don't like that. I'm super conservative here. I started my journey in 2010. Back then, Southern California was pennies on the dollar, right? 10, 12% cash on cash was like easy peasy everywhere. So I'm coming from that mindset. So when I look at the property today, if it's not cash flowing today, moving in, or at least after 12 to 18 months of stabilization or improvement of value add, it's not for us.
What kind of leverage do you usually get involved in? What's your,
In my perfect world, we would not go under 30, or 70% leveraged, Again, it's conservative, We have people doing, I heard about bridge loans are back and all other things are back, which were on frozen in the COVID world. The people doing 20 back again, but we will 30, 35 is where our comfort zone is.
so an property that needs, improving. So your ROI initially is what, and what do you expect it when it's stabilized?
Excellent question. So ROI is return on investment. Moving in, these are very broad questions, and we can talk about Bird pretty much the whole evening.
I'm
But
sorry, I don't
moving in,
put you on the spot. It's just, I've been
no,
doing.
that's fine. I'm glad you're asking. Moving in, if within 12 to 18, usually, that's not the only criteria, but one of the major criteria, if within 12 to 18 months, we're not able to generate, 5 to 8% cash on cash, it will be a tough pill to swallow to pursue that asset.
Okay.
And in a market today, like Phoenix, for example, you said Phoenix was hot, 122, right? Phoenix is also hot when it comes to real estate.
No.
It's hard to cash flow 5% from day one in Phoenix. Now, is it possible? It sure is. It sure is. It requires a whole lot more. Well, first of all, finding the asset which demands a heavy capex, which creates a sufficient value add to demand a higher rent in a neighborhood which can support that new demands. So it's possible, but it's challenging. To answer your question, 12 to 18 months is the thumb rule that we go with. That should yield 5 to 8% cash on cash. In a long street.
Have you ever bought directly from a principal, or usually brokers?
Brokers.
Like Marcus Millichap or whoever's in
there. So excellent. You are throwing big nuggets. These are like
I was hired to be a spy to make sure you know what you're talking about.
I was talking to Mike earlier that we need to do a meetup just on this, where buying an asset from a broker, a fully market asset, versus going to direct to owners versus a small mom and pop brokers, right? That's the spectrum. That's the spectrum, right? You can buy property directly from a principal or a group, or you can go to fully market Marcus Millichap properties, right? Clearly, Marcus Millichap is there like the Cadillac of brokers. So
yeah, you're going to pay top retail through them.
Yeah, that's retail price. That's pure retail. Going to principals or the groups directly and going directly to the owners, I think those days are gone. Those are far few in between.
Depends how big it is. I don't know how many units you bought. Like, what's the big
That
you bought?
that's right. That's right. How big do you buy the market? And then there's an answer in between, which is the mom and pop brokers, the small brokerages.
I'd like to
Um,
share an experience that the group might like to hear. I mean, this is real. I don't want to. I got a lot of stories. So I used to cold call when I was 24. I started as an agent. I bought my first building on my own listing. 3 months after I started cold calling, way before Marcus and Milchep. I worked for a company in Century City, and then I started calling. I said, maybe I'll call some brokers and see what they have.
mhm.
I noticed something as a broker buyer. You may not know this, but you could present an offer on your behalf. So I was two people. And when the broker who had the listing said, "What's the price?" I said, "Well, I'd like to present it directly to the owner with you as the selling broker." And there were a few times the broker said, "I didn't know he would sell it for that price or those terms." And I said, "Of course you didn't know, because you're not on the opposite side of the table. You got to do what he says. Otherwise, you won't get the listing." So, and it was a mom and pop broker. So anyway, I just thought I'd share that. So
No, thank you for sharing. That's wonderful.
Hey, I have a question really quick. Can you share some of like the common challenges that you face when you, kind of start going with the syndications?
Absolutely. Nick, are you talking about the paperwork and the legal issues, or are you talking specific to an asset or market?
Uh, More so just to just a common challenge that, because you said you just started as a GP on one syndication, is that correct?
This was the first successful syndication. Yeah, we lost
Got it.
hundreds of offers before this. Yes.
Can you share just some of like the challenges that you guys faced, not so much contracting, but after you had it under contract, throughout the process of holding it, maybe just to touch on a couple challenges and how you overcame that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So let me rephrase that. Let me make sure that you ask me the right question. You're saying we have property under contract. Now we are in the game to raise the capital, do the DD, get the loan, yada yada yada. Is that right? In that phase?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, more so just some challenges that you guys ran into after you had the capital. You guys were, maybe let's just pretend you're in year two, and some challenges maybe that came up that you didn't think would come up in a syndication.
Sure, sure. So we got this property in the making took almost 5 months before we actually landed the PSA. So there were some challenges in there by itself. That's all negotiation. Once we went into escrow, then came the challenge of due diligence. When I say challenge, that's because of COVID. We are talking month of Marchish. Yeah, Marchish. So COVID was still kind of declining, but still there, and it was a challenge just to get to the property, get to the tenants, walk through the units. Little things like that are something it's a 60 unit building, 60. Something could have been done in one day easily. It took us good almost 3 days. Getting bids, you know, once we get there, we want to get a really good understanding of the capex. Um, the contractors were far few in between. Either they're swamped or they just are doing ridiculous pricing. They're just throwing a number that doesn't even make sense. I'll give you an example. We want to quantify an asphalt for a parking lot. As of today, we have not received, we wanted 5 bids. We have not received 5 bids. So a little challenge like that, which did not plan for.
Right.
When
Okay.
when it comes to capital raising, and the legality behind it, it took a while. It did take a while. We didn't plan for to last all the way to 60 days, but we were cutting pretty close. And turns out, because we are, in all full transparency, this was our first syndication. We had a beautiful sets of friends and family and neighbors and coworkers from past lives. They're all ready to go, but there were few IRA deposits. So now, when we engaged a third-party IRA vendor, there were some hiccups over there. So that kind of pushed the money coming in. What else? I can go on and on. Did I answer a question, Nick?
Yeah, no, that did answer my question. I appreciate it. Did you guys run into some issues where I think you just kind of touched on it. You had like some verbal commitments on capital and then they didn't end up getting transferred to the title company. Was that pretty common?
I don't know. I meant more on the commitments coming in, as people sign the PPM, but the
Right.
capital not coming in.
It wasn't
Because
matching what they were saying.
I have
No,
solicited.
I think there was a communication gap. And so now what we are doing is I have my operations manual coming in, lessons learned, because what they were thinking is they will be able to wire the money. It's a little thing. They'll be able to
Yeah.
just transfer the funds through their online bank account. Duh, go to the
Yeah.
bank and wire the money, because we use the tool called InvestNext.
Got
And
it.
in the InvestNext, there's so little thing like that. The other person who wanted to use the IRA, it took like a week just to get all set up. So next time we're gonna give them a 30-day advance notice. Hey, your drop date is this because you're using IRA.
Got
Yes,
it.
Bert. Yes,
Good
Bert.
to know. Good to know for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Sure.
What was the average contribution equity?
Hi, Bert. Let's talk offline. But I'll tell you this: it's a 60-unit building. Our total raise was $1.8 million. You can do the math.
Well, not the average. I don't know how. Okay, yeah, 15. Okay, I get it. All right, I'm just
Get
going to give you a possible solution. Did anybody, when they started, back out for whatever reason?
You mean they signed the document that did not fund?
A limited partner that said they're
Uh-huh.
going to put up so much money. Did they
Uh-huh.
ever back? Did any of them back out in midstream when you needed?
Of course.
Okay.
And we expected that.
Okay.
So to
I'm
let
trying to
me.
get a solution because I've been through that. If you want to,
Yes,
I'm
please.
free
Yes,
advice.
please.
I've been doing this longer than everybody here.
Yeah.
So if somebody was putting up 100,000, wherever they were getting it from, I would have them put up 10%. And obviously they have to trust your judgment as GP. And then I'm going to call for the 90,000 and give you 30 days notice. And if you don't have the 90, you could go lose your 10. Your 10 is at risk.
I see. I
Right.
see.
Okay.
Thank you for sharing that. Now that I shared that, but Dick, I think that's a good point that Bert made. So we have been working on our syndication business for a year now. Oh, actually more than a year now. Mike is older; he has started earlier, and we have wonderful commitments from people. But what we learned firsthand is many times people will have you go first, see how you do it, and then when the time comes, they will come and commit. You with me, Nick?
Yes, I'm still here.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that was a wonderful lesson that I learned personally.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Hey, Kanal, I have a question.
Absolutely, Brian.
Yeah, so when you're receiving loans for the properties, when you're raising money, are you doing more conventional loans or interest-only loans or P&Is?
Oh, wonderful topic. Again, we can talk about it the whole evening, the whole debt structure. It just depends, Brian. It depends on what type of asset is it, where it's located, secondary market, tertiary market, what's
Peter, sorry, do you want to do this? Yeah, I'll draft. Thank you. So thank you all for being here. This is an amazing turnout. I think for having this day, so that's a great problem to have. My name is Caleb, and I'm with the UK Development Group. I do marketing and investor relations, and Mike here is my partner, and he does some of the operation stuff. And so I think we are working with this is kind of our team. We're doing slides. So Michael Wagman, investor relations, Kunal, managing partner, finance and operations. Paul is doing some development stuff. So we have a 192 unit in Casa Grande that Paul is kind of helping a lot with. So that's a great blessing. Amy is doing property management with CalCap. And so I know there's a lot of operators in here. If you guys need property management, go over her because she's demanding. And then that is Caleb Johnson, I guess. Yeah. And so we also have a great turnout because we are working with another organization. So Outlaw Capital, Cindy Harding and Lynn are not here currently, but Larry and Sherry are. They're right over here. And so, yeah, it's a great turnout because we're working with them. So thank you guys for coming in. Thank you. I appreciate it, guys. Yeah. I didn't plan that slide, so go ahead. That's all
Where you go with that, right?
Yeah.
Dude, we rehearsed this.
I'm blanking on it.
First of all, I'm super stoked. This is our first real big meetup, and so glad that everyone's here. We filled this. I think we filled almost every seat. We got a handful of people on Zoom, so super excited to just share a little bit about our journey. Sherry and Larry share a little bit about their journey today, and we want this to be not a formal presentation, but definitely just a discussion. We'll have some stuff in the background to kind of walk through. And I like this slide for a couple reasons. Like, I love real estate. We can talk about real estate all day long from now until they'll kick us out. And I think a lot of folks in this room feel the same way. There's a lot of passion and energy. So I pretty much have this on every slide deck just because it's awesome. So jumping into this, how many folks understand or know what syndication is? All right, the majority of the room, yeah? Anyone that doesn't, it's okay if you didn't raise your hand, but really, you know, we have an opportunity to go buy large apartment complexes, right? But syndication can be done in anything. If we wanted to get into the brewery business, we can syndicate that, right? Everyone can write us a check, and we get together and we operate this thing. So as a passive investor on the syndication side, right, you can contribute your capital, still have ownership, still have cash flow, but you count on someone like us as operators to run apartment buildings, breweries, or whatever you want to buy, right? And so that's just, I like this visual. I kind of looked for it for a while. I didn't want to put 72 words on the slide deck to explain it, but you invest, you find some people you trust, you are like these folks that are enjoying some time on the beach, and you get good cash flow. So any questions, or if any of you that didn't raise your hand that don't understand syndication, this is a safe room. There's lots of folks that do understand this. So if I don't have the answer, somebody in this room will. Okay. Good? Awesome. All right. And so I think what we're going to do is spend a lot of time on this. For the cheap seats, can you guys, can you see that okay? Yeah? Full screen. I will absolutely try to do that. Hey, all right, here we go. Sorry, Zoom folks. Move it over to the right. Actually, let's do that. There we go. So I was looking around, trying to think about the spectrum of, you know, even in this room, there's a spectrum of investors, right? Whether you're active, you're passive, you're both, right? Like I'm both. I'm an active operator, but I'm also a passive investor. And what does it look like? And where does syndication fall? But where do you want to be? And you know, is there a perfect answer? It really just depends on where you are in your life. So again, we have a whole room full of experts here, right? But there's a doctor. So this, I didn't invent this. There's a guy, passive income MD. So he's a medical doctor that had the same questions. So we found him, and then I modified it a little bit because it didn't have everything I wanted. But we should start on the active side, right? So there's kind of two spectrums, right? What type of product and activity do you want to participate in? And then what's the relevant return or risk and reward, right? So if I go this way, higher risk, higher reward, more activity. Lower risk, lower reward, literally no activity, right? You take your cash and you plug it in, whether it's online, a mutual fund, 401, you know, any kind of asset you could invest into through a fund. So these are kind of some of the benefits. I won't go through each piece, but we kind of found the sweet spot right here, right? And it's right on the cusp of, you know, what's the difference between active and passive? Is are you the landlord, or are you overseeing the landlord, right? Or do you want to be the landlord? So we felt that we could be on this side, manage the manager, and still have a very good amount of returns, really good tax benefits, which by the way, a lot of this stuff on this side doesn't. And on that side definitely does, but again, there's a little more complexity. Very asset specific. But there's a little bit of complexity, right? And I think this is the reason I highlighted it is the due diligence of the operator, right? So there's lots of operators, maybe even in this room. How do you vet them? What's the process? And what do you do to ensure, as much as you can, that your investment is safe, right? So there's homework on the asset, and then there's homework on the operator. I think those two are probably the most important things. The business plan is in between, but we as humans, we typically do business with people we like and trust. And then you have the asset that should be a good asset, should be priced right, and all that kind of good stuff. But, I'll pause and just kind of open it up to the room, like questions, comments. Like, again, I can talk about me more, but I'd rather talk about you guys. Yeah.
What are some questions you ask an operator?
So first is track record, right? So as new operators, how do you get into the business, right? It's probably will you say one of our first challenges, right? So Sherry, Laird, and Lynn and Cindy, we're all went through a education program where we learned the ins and outs of real estate. So I've been in this 18 months or so, and I was in a totally different business before. Didn't know anything about syndication or real estate. So some days I wonder how I'm standing up here, but it's pretty awesome that we were able to do what we did. So we did formal education, but we found partners, to answer your question, that had experience. So if I want to go buy a 4-plex, I could do that. If I want to go buy a 40-plex or a 100-plex, the bank's going to look at me going, well, let's look at your balance sheet first. And even if I have the balance sheet, they're going to say, you ever done this before? No. So they want, during COVID, right, they said, you need to have current experience in the market, in the size of unit you want to buy. So if you want to buy a 100-unit project in Phoenix, you should have closed on a 100-unit project in Phoenix in the last 12 to 18 months, right? So that eliminates a whole lot of people, right? So then you got to find the right partners, and we were blessed to find actually the same partner, right? Eric, he should join. He may or may not be on the call, but yeah, that was one piece. It's a good question. What else? Do you guys have some color to add?
You need to find the right match. You need to find the right match in a sponsor, which is what you're talking about. You need to find someone who's as passionate about the property as you are, somebody who's willing to give you the advice you need when you need it, not stand back and let you fail, help you to succeed, and who's willing to move forward with you and partner on another deal after that. You don't want a one-shot deal. You want somebody who's willing to stand with you and partner with you on multiple deals.
And I think it's cool too, because it's important to have somebody that does this full time, right? Because me personally, I have a full-time job and I can meet people, do these sort of thing after hours, right? But I can't dedicate myself to it. And so it's really important, like Mike, that's all he does is full-time syndication. Eric, he's a lender, I think. And so, but he does passive deals, so he's more of a balance sheet guy. But still really important that you have like somebody like a coach full-time in your corner that does that. So
yeah, and every person willing to sponsor you is not necessarily a good fit for you.
That was going to just say that, right?
Exactly.
Do your diligence internally, right? Before we found Eric, I actually had 2 other, KPs that were, I'll sign on the note. No issues with balance sheet, no issues with experience. Well, when we finally came down to a deal where we were right there in the hunt, they backed out, failed, right? So I'm kind of left holding the bag, right? Oh shit, what do I do? So fortunately, we called Eric, and it just worked out really well. So build your team first. There's a slide that talks about that, but do you guys want to talk a little bit about why did you guys, there's a lot of folks looking to get in. Why did you do apartments? Why syndication?
Well, our partners, Lynn and Cindy, brought us in. They went through the training initially. Their son, Tyler, who now lives in Tulsa, was looking at some way of creating a legacy, and first looked in at doing single family flips, and then was looking in tax sales, and came upon the multifamily space and suggested that his parents go to a multifamily seminar. And they did that. They went through some of the training, and then they started looking at who they wanted to partner with. And we've been friends for over 30 years. Matter of fact, our youngest daughter and their oldest son are married, and the kids grew up together and have known each other since they were 3, parents forever. And I'm a retired escrow officer. I was in the title insurance business for 35 years. And so I've worked with real estate attorneys, I've worked with timelines, I've worked with all the different contracts and deals and the documents. So Cindy knew my background. Cindy has had an accounting business specializing in small business for 25 years. So she has the accounting background. My husband Laird has a background in business management and in marketing. And then Lynn, Cindy's husband, is in the construction industry and specializing in roofing. So the balance of our team just made sense. And they invited us in. We went through the training, went through the boot camp, and decided maybe this was something we could do. It was, made sense for us. And
it was basically a way for us to say, all right, we're going to create a legacy for our children. We're going to do something that's next in our life. I mean, yeah, we're over 60, so there's a lot of people in this room that may be in our range or close to it. There's a lot of young people. And we realized that, hey, listen, we probably should have done this 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago. But we realized that, there's enough time for us to build our own portfolio, to develop something that our kids can take over and, continue with the legacy. So that's it. It's designed. We have some intermediate goals. We have goals that are set to get Lynn and myself into the business full time. We both have W-2 jobs right now, but we both also have control over our schedules, so we can head off to someplace, take a look at the property or that type of thing, which has been kind of neat. I fly all over the country anyway, so it is a stepping stone for us. We know what we need to get to in the number of units so that we can, so Lynn and myself can both go into this full time. Once we go into it full time, then we're going to grow from that point and then bring in the kids and create this business that is going to last forever, hopefully.
That's awesome. I have a question for you. Are the kids willing participants at this point?
Actually, 2 of them are. So that's a good thing. And each of them have their own skill sets too. So some are better in sales.
Tyler is a born salesman.
Sherry talked about Tyler. This guy can sell you anything.
He can sell.
And if you buy something, he's going to get it for half the price that you think that you're going to sell it for. So he's fantastic at negotiation too.
And then Lorik's more of the accounting.
Lorik's more of the accounting type of guy. So they'll have their own strengths in that will go on. When we finally get our oldest daughter involved, she's more of a marketing type of person, more like me, and plus she can also build anything that you want to think of.
She has her own she shed, and she has radial arm saws and things like that. She doesn't have a cushy couch.
Yeah, we share her tools all the time. So
Awesome.
So yeah, they are interested in doing this, and it's something that they're looking forward to getting started. They're already starting some of the training, so if they're interested in what we're doing.
Question.
Do you mostly have what is your portfolio pretty diverse between syndication and single families, or do you lean towards one?
So we started 2 years ago.
Okay.
We have a single property 80 units right now.
Okay.
But we're looking at a bunch of other ones right now, and we put in offers all the time. That's the whether or not we can.
We closed our first project on March 26th of this year. An 80-unit apartment complex in Vicksburg, Mississippi.
Okay. So for someone like we're accustomed to being mentioned an active investor, very hands-on. What kind of level of transparency do you look for when you're kind of getting over those reins?
Getting over reins. We are general partners in the transaction. We aren't passive investors, so we're very hands-on. We do have an on-site manager. We do have property management. And we live here, so we're not in Vicksburg all the time, but we do have Monday morning reports that we go over with a fine-tooth comb. We get the financials monthly, we go over those with a fine-tooth comb. We have a weekly meeting with the property management company and the on-site manager where we go over all the nuances going on at the property. So we're very much involved in it.
Okay.
No, I have a question. So your 8 unit you bought 2 years ago, did you already refinance it for your money
No,
out?
we just closed on it March 26th.
Oh, you've
This
been in the
year.
business 2 years, but you just closed.
Just closed on our first transaction.
But your intent is to just keep
Our
going.
intent, when we went into this, we went into it with a 5, a 7, and a 10-year hold. Exit strategy. So if we meet our numbers, we should be, which we're way ahead right now. We've been able to increase our income by 13% in the first 60 days. She's awesome. Anyway, we've been able to increase, we've been able to add rugs, we've been able to charge for pest control, for garbage trash, and rugs on water. There were already individually metered units. And we are 100% occupied right now.
You got a quick note, so I forgot to tell you guys, so there's a microphone here, so the Zoom
Okay.
folks can hear it. So if you could just, as you guys ask questions, you should be able to pick everyone up at the back, just kind of a little bit louder than normal, so we don't ignore our folks on Zoom.
Yes.
Just out of curiosity, did you guys have to renovate the apartment complex before you?
Actually, when we bought the property was very stable, had been stable for over 10 years, had been at 94
96.
or 96% occupancy or better for 10 years. The owner that we purchased it from had owned it for 40 years. This building was built in 1986, or this complex was built in 1986. There are 7 buildings. Was extremely well managed and extremely well maintained. The roofs were done in 2019, late 2019. They've been replacing HVAC units as they go out, so there was no deferred maintenance, really. I mean, minimal deferred maintenance. So we actually went in with a plan to do improvements, but because of the labor shortage and because of the cost of materials, we haven't had to implement that completely yet. We've decided to wait. We have a waiting list and we're 100% occupied and we've been able to increase rents.
Increase rents without doing any
Without doing any
renovations. So that-
renovations except for paint.
Yeah.
and
It's usually
floors,
make ready, it's just
those
paint
type-
and,
Make ready.
you know, if it's a renewal, you know, we might offer some small incentive for them to renew, whether it be new ceiling fans or new lighting package or new plumbing, you know, that type of thing. It
Right
just-
now,
it depends
yeah,
on-
right now we're charging $40 additional on renewals per month. And we're giving them a little bit of a spiff on an improvement of their choice.
And new renters are paying $80 more.
Greg, you got a question?
Yeah, since you guys took over and you raised the NOI, do you know how much value you added to the property? Like maybe how many millions of dollars that added to the property?
Well, I don't know if we've done that calculation since we've actually started getting the hard numbers back. But we know that our exit strategy, as we put it together at 5 years, we're gonna have a 20% annualized return. If we go out to 10 years, we're up to 24.5% annualized return. So it just depends on, you know, how the market goes. And we were very conservative when we did our actual analysis. So we bought the property at 7.2. Okay, a cash rate of 7.2. When we did.
What's that?
The action, which is only 40 miles away, is already pushing into the low 6s. When we did our exit strategy, we looked at an 8% exit 7.5% exit and a 7% exit. At the 7.5% exit, we're at the 20% annualized return. If we get a push down to into the sixes, we're going to be probably closer to 30%.
So
annualized return.
to add on to
So hopefully that helps to give you an idea on that.
yeah, no, just to add on to that, so for our deal, similar, maybe not as exciting quite yet, but getting close. Close in May, so they have a 2-month head start. But our 60 unit got really aggressive, and our property management company was like, you guys are so far below market, you need to really get aggressive. So we went up to about $200 per unit for the lease renewal. So we have 20 out of our 60 that have renewed at the new rate of $200+. So if you do that math, just on 20 units, if you annualize that out, divided by 6.5 cap, which we got it for, it's almost $800,000 in 2 months. Right? And so as we get through all 60, I think the math was $2.5 million-ish if we sold at the same cap rate, right? And we've already found that cap rates continue to decline or compress. But yeah, this is why you gotta get excited, right? Like, remember that slide, right? That's how you create value, right? It's really good. So you guys touched a little bit on your team. So you had a pretty solid internal team, but we want to share a little bit about this.
Yes.
For those of you that are getting started, I spent a year and a half just underwriting, and some of the education platforms out there will just say, go find the deal, get the deal under contract, you'll find your sponsor, you'll find your team, you'll find the money. And I call bullshit.
Yeah.
I would say, go find a good sponsor, build that relationship as you do this, because you'll get to that point. And again, it happened to me twice that I didn't have anyone to sign the note. I didn't have a KP to help me raise money.
It took us 3 tries to get this property, and we had 3 opportunities with sponsors. So we took the 3rd opportunity, obviously, but it took us 3 tries and almost a year to negotiate this property.
Part of it was because of COVID and the issues associated with that. We purposely slowed things down. We wanted to see how the property was going to operate or perform during the COVID. 98% or better the entire time. There was no delinquencies. Nobody actually.
No COVID claims at all.
Yeah, no COVID claims.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
An obvious question. Mississippi is not between here and like superstitions or bad.
Right.
So why Mississippi? I happened to run into an 80 unit in Mississippi.
So broker relationships, and this is probably one of the guys that is up there. He's broker up there in the green. So and we checked different ways of developing brokers, but I found this broker online. I gave him a cold call just one day, and I'm just talking to him, letting him know a little bit about our organization here, and what we can do, and what we think we're looking for, and stuff like that. He started feeding us crap. Okay, and everybody will go through that when you're doing your underwriting. You'll get all these properties that come through, and they're just complete garbage. It's like they want to, kind of feed you to get you to buy down. I called him bullshit on that one. And I would call him back on the property and say, listen, this is the reason I don't like the property. And I would go through these things, and I would list the problems that were with the property. I'd ask for his solutions to them. And he's like, oh, yeah, no, that was just a property that we have, and I'm just trying to appease the owner. But eventually he realized that I wasn't just playing games with this, that I actually knew what I was talking about. I knew what I was looking for. I knew how to analyze the property so that they were going to, so the numbers worked. And he started throwing better properties at me. And finally, this property came along that actually worked. So that's one of the things, because it's Mississippi. It was a long ways away from us. We actually had to do an analysis of the area to make sure that it was something that we could work with. I was fortunate. I was traveling just before COVID got us all shut down, and I went and I visited the property. And once I saw the property, then it was like, okay, I'm serious about this. I really want to do this property. I had already started to look at the Chamber of Commerce. I started looking at the businesses that were there. I looked at the employment base that was there. All these factors that you've got to analyze to understand the market potential of it being there. And once the package came together, it was like, okay, this is good property, the numbers make sense, the market makes sense, it's a growing market, it's not a shrinking market. And so we start to put the deal together. And yeah, fortunately, we had already created relationships with some people who could be potential sponsors. We hadn't, actually signed them on, but, we knew their potential. And we had already talked to management companies, and we had some relationships that were developed with management companies. We ended up not using those because of some, that's part of the ugly that you see every now and then when they're out there. Yeah, and it eventually just worked out for us.
I was gonna say, so even though the name is Apartment Investors Club in Phoenix, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to buy in Phoenix.
Two questions for you. I assume you raised pre-closing all your CapEx that you had planned?
Yes.
So that you're just holding that until
yes,
such time that it can be utilized?
That's correct.
Okay. And did you, I'm assuming that it hasn't affected your returns for your investors at all. You're just holding the funds until.
Yeah, we made a couple of small improvements, but nothing near what we had planned on doing because of the shortage of materials and the cost of labor. But Mississippi, fortunately, or unfortunately for those who were benefiting from it, stopped the federal payments. Yes, in the first of last month. So we've seen a few more people come up who were willing to do some of the jobs that
and quite frankly, since we're at 100%, we're just still kind of pushing the rents up to see, because eventually there's going to be a point where they're going to say, no, we're not going to do it. At that point, then we can come in, we can do a little bit more renovation, we can upgrade some of the rooms, actually then test the market to see how far we can push the rates.
And we have some natural turns happening.
Right.
And then this sounds like a B property in a B area, yes?
Yeah, actually, it's right next door to a country club. And we have a police officer that lives on site that we give a little spiff to, and he takes care of us. And we have the lowest crime rate in Vicksburg.
Of any property.
In Vicksburg.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Good stuff. So you guys started with broker relations, found the deal flow, but anything in blue is really kind of some key folks that you're going to need on your team. As you underwrite, as you talk to folks, line these people up, right? And then this is other people maybe outside of your organization that you definitely need to touch base with. So again, I talk about CalCap a lot, but I went to them last March before we ever had a deal, and just kind of connected with Amy and said, hey, this is what we're looking to do. And when I get there, we'll get there. And so they've kind of been on the journey with us.
Oh, no, sorry.
What's the other one? Get a good real estate attorney. Insurance reps is always really important. But yeah, I can't not talk about the loan piece, the loan sponsor, and the experience. It could be two different people, by the way, right? It doesn't have to be the same person, but sometimes it helps. If it's the same person, it's less to split. Right? So remember, the pie is so big. But we went into the deal thinking we're going to make this much money, right? Because we're all in this to make a little bit of cash, right? But trying to get our first deal done was so important that we were like, let's not let that get in the way of not being able to do the deal. Because without that sponsor, sometimes sponsors can be a little expensive, and that's totally okay, right? Just expect that and move forward. So, any questions of like who's at this point where they're really looking for some help, looking for a sponsor, looking to maybe not do you understand this? Does it make sense?
Mike, how did you go about finding a sponsor? You said you went through a few different ones, didn't have great luck, and then ended up landing on obviously great partnership. But
yeah,
what was
so
the process like?
the great question. So through the network, we had our coaches and we had a few folks that we connected with, but that wasn't quite meeting some of the metrics. So Bigger Pockets, there's some Bigger Pockets folks in here, right? So found some folks on Bigger Pockets and connected. There's actually a person looking to hire someone for underwriting. And I was like, hey, I've underwritten like 600 deals in the last 6 months. Like, what do you think? And he's like, I like Phoenix. And so we connected on that front. So I found a way to bring value to that group, right? And he was like, in exchange, you get this carve out and I'll sign the note. So that didn't work well because then he decided to change his mind. But that happens. So have 2 or 3 or 4 folks that you're always you know, talking to, courting, having conversations around, courting is not the right word. having conversations on, but just building the relationship, right? Cultivating is the right word. That's what I was looking for. My wife wouldn't like me courting. But yeah, that's pretty much how we did it. What else? Yes, sir.
Like when you're talking to sponsors and trying to find something, what do you have to offer them for a return for them to be a sponsor, assuming they like you and they like the property?
It's a good question. It's a broad question. I won't give you specifics because I think it's very deal dependent. I've seen it as low as 10% of the carve out. So syndication, right? You have a GP piece and you have an LP piece. 70-30, you guys heard this carve out, right? So you'll see 60-40, 70-30, 80-20. Our deal was a 70-30 deal. So 70% went to the limited partners. The 30% was the general partnership. In that 30%, we have a few people, right? So that carve out for that sponsor could be from 10% to 30% to 50%. Just really depends on the value you bring, the value they bring. I think it's very broad. But if someone just signs on a note, because there's people that are they're looking to get into a deal and they just want the KP experience, but they have, say, the net worth, right? Then they won't be able to command as much as someone that has lots of experience, lots of units, lots of net worth, right? So the range is broad, but I think 30 and below, all the way from 10 to 30 is probably somewhere in the range. I mean, I don't know if anyone else has done syndications. Is that, am I close? Or?
We ended up splitting 50-50 with our sponsors, and we had 2 sponsors. So they each got 25%.
Okay.
And then as we brought in more people into the GP, our portion suffered. So be prepared for that. Be prepared. I'm not saying that was a bad thing because we got the deal done. We closed it. We're successful with the management and of the property so far. This is our first deal, so we feel blessed beyond measure. But you can't go into it thinking that 30% is going to be, is going to be my nest egg. You have to be willing to give up for the partnership, for the purchase. You need to be willing to spend the money on.
That all comes down to the investors that are there, because you might have a pretty good stable of individuals that you can talk to that have wealth that they can bring into the deal. But there might be a point in time where you have to bring somebody else into the deal that maybe has relationships. Maybe somebody that that wants to be part of the GP, that they have several investors that are going to come in. Well, there's a carve out that you need to make for that type of an individual to bring in that additional money.
They have to have a job in the syndication.
Yes,
they have to have an ongoing job. You can't just bring in somebody and pay them for their value as with their investor pool, because that's against SEC regulations. So they have to have a job in the ongoing operations. So you can't just say, oh, you have a lot of contacts, we'll just bring you in. So you have to be a little careful there. Yes.
Sorry, forgive me if you guys have answered this, but were your sponsors, did you say, was it your friend Cindy and her husband?
No.
Or how did you guys find your sponsor?
They're actually, our sponsor was Eric Stewart. And Mike also has him as a sponsor in his transaction. And Vanessa Alfaro was our other sponsor.
And we had met these individuals at the conference where we talked to investors, other people with like minds to us and stuff like that. So we worked on our network, that partnership that you develop. Talk to everybody. Make sure that you have business cards to talk to, that you let them know that you're interested in doing this. Find out what their capabilities are. Find out if they ever do sponsor anybody, because you'll see some people say, not kind of a sponsor.
We almost made a big mistake with Eric, actually. We asked Eric about helping us with the loan on the property. And he said, sure, I'll do that. But why didn't you ask me to sponsor? Because we already had Vanessa set up to sponsor, and we were like, we didn't know you could do both at the same time.
You don't know if you don't ask, right?
So you don't know if you don't ask.
Ask her
and a great asset for us.
Yeah, awesome.
That's good. What else? Yes, sir.
Can we explore something you said about the fundraiser, money raiser? You have to have a job to satisfy the SEC. I've heard that before.
Yeah.
How far do you have to go? What kind of job satisfies the SEC
You can
requirement?
have them be an investor relations person and have them actually, help with determining the carve-outs. You can have them work with their stable of investors on communications. You can have them work with the cost segregation company. You can there's a number of jobs. There's a lot of jobs.
It just can't correlate, sorry, it just can't correlate with, if you bring in $1 million and I pay you a percentage of that $1 million.
Right.
That's a big piece.
Yes.
But you also need to make sure that they are part of the GP, the general partnership. So there's meetings that they'll be involved in, there's regular schedules, for things. It's not like you just give them a title and say, okay, so you're gonna take care of your people and you never talk to them again.
Right.
They've got to be part of the business.
And you'll see their activity in the minutes of the LLC.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, good.
A little side discussion. So the
Yeah.
question or the commentary was, everyone in the party, in the GP side, has to have a job.
Well, the GP
Right.
side, yes. I was talking about the investors, the passive.
Yeah.
No.
No, the passives, I know, they don't, they
The
just.
passives don't
money.
have.
Yeah.
No, so the way the question came up was,
Yeah.
this person right here.
Yes.
Right? So we have a person on our team, and he's not on the call, but Michael Wagman is on our team. He was the predominant, his efforts, we all raise money. His predominant effort was to go bring in the big guys, right? So that's what he did, right? So his role is that, but he manages the relationship all to the point of that. But if I only said, Michael, you bring in $1 million and I'll pay you 10% or 1%.
Yeah.
No. Can't do that, right?
Then he's a broker dealer then.
Then he's a broker dealer. Now, if he was a broker dealer,
Yeah.
we could do that, right? Because they're licensed to be able to do that. It's a different story. Most folks in this space aren't.
I've been taught by a securities attorney and a few other people with a lot of experience that the job can be as simple as having that person just call and turn the utilities on. They perform the job.
I don't think there's anything specific that says
Okay.
this job
Specific job description.
My point is,
You
it
have to have a
doesn't,
job.
for a lot of people in this room where it's kind of going over their head, it's a bit overwhelming. This concept of, well, the job is investor relations or this and that. It's a lot to take in if you're just starting.
Understood. No, it's fair. So there's a lot of pieces to this.
Their compensation cannot be based on how much money they bring in.
Exactly.
That's the major part.
That's the major
thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Good. Well, let's go and look at. So we thought we'd share a little bit about, maybe, here we go. The passive investor side. So now it's just the pure LP. So let's start talking about the GP side. So if you're an LP and you're looking, you know what, I want to dabble. I personally did this first, right? I'm invested in a couple different deals, and man, if I just had more capital, this is all I would do. Because now someone else does the work, someone else goes and finds the deal, someone else goes and manages the manager. But I'm not there yet, so eventually, yeah, we'd love to do that. But there's a component of active and passive that I like. Not everyone likes that. Some folks love their W-2, and they're like, this is all I want to do, but I want to put my money to work a little bit faster, a little bit more aggressively. So, what are you betting on, right? You have people, you have the asset, you have the plan. So what do you guys think? What's the most important if you're to prioritize these three?
Yeah, the people, yeah.
Right? So let's look at a little case example, right? Let you guys read that for a second. So, who votes for number one? Matt? No. Okay. Number two? No? Or no voting? You're not in this. You're in the wrong room.
Knowing most of what that says, I would go with two.
Okay, so let's break that down. So we want this to be helpful for you. So, what part doesn't make sense?
You know him because you've met him a few times, you know the background. Yeah, you've got some familiarity with this person, so you can probably gauge if they're good, or at least if they're gonna be trustworthy.
So what's the part you didn't understand?
20% IRR value add on the top one.
Okay.
It's like terms that I'm not familiar with.
Sure. Okay. So let's break that down. So value add. You guys have heard of value add? Value add is dead in Phoenix, by the way. So value add just means we find a property that's likely classic, meaning none of the interiors have been touched. It's maybe been owned by the same owner for a long time. It's been sitting around. The rents have gone up in the market. So let's say the rents for one bedroom are $1,000, and your property is at $700. So you have some room to raise the rents, but you got to renovate, you got to improve the property, and get the rents to market. So that's a value add.
You're adding value.
You're adding value by improving the property and raising the rents. That's value add, right? Today, no dig on Phoenix owners, right? It's tough. It's really tough to find value add.
It's been
Is that the only value add that you focus on?
No, that's only one. The other value add, thanks, man. Keep me on track. Well, so there's actually three. There's three things. So one is the income side. One's the income side. The other is the operational side. So if you think of operations, sometimes we're looking at a deal right now in New Mexico that the payroll is like 3x of what it should be. Right, so right away, there's just like way too many people. There's a deal in Tucson, same thing, right? Property manager lives in New York, or I'm sorry, the owner lives in New York. Property manager has hired like cousins and friends and whatever, right? And so the payroll is like $300,000 for a 100-unit property, right? So if you know anything in Phoenix, you're looking at maybe $1,000 a door, so 100 grand-ish is what payroll should be, maybe 120. It's almost double, right? So if you take that 150 divided by a 4 cap rate, I'm going too fast, sorry. You immediately find a way to bring value.
You also need to look at the contracts.
Yeah.
Contracts can be renegotiated. We were able to take our trash contract down $600 a month.
Wow.
That's $7,200 a year.
Yeah.
Right.
We're working on our internet program, and we've been able to cut costs on the insurance also. So, there's a lot of different ways to make things work.
So the term value adds an umbrella, right?
Yeah.
Fixing rents is one lever. Fixing operations is another lever. There's a term called loss to lease. And remember I said the rent's $1,000 in the market, and yours is at $700. So you have $300. You could go in, and this is what we're doing on our property. We haven't done any renovations. The market is so hot, and our rents are so low, and there's so much demand. We're just burning off. So it's called burn off, loss to lease. You're burning off the delta, the difference. Okay. So I'm going 700 to 800, 800 to 900, 900 to 1,000. So I'm getting close to market without really any renovations.
Plus there's RUBS.
Yeah, so we can talk about RUBS. So have you ever heard of RUBS? Right, so who's heard of RUBS? Who can explain RUBS? Amy, you want to explain RUBS?
No, I don't.
It's just short for resident utility building system. So, if you've got 1 meter for the water typically for the multifamily properties, and you're gonna then divide that pro rata and spread it across the tenants and bill back for them for their water use. Master metered, often utilities are included. Sometimes you can put that on RUBS. There's other things on the RUBS. Your valet trash service could be an additional income stream.
Pest control, we charge for pets. We've got, we did RUBS on the water. Each cars are individually metered. And then we're charging for insurance as well.
Wow. Well, you're making that a triple net sort of lease.
One of my partners, he uses Appfolio, and now they have I guess programs within Appfolio that will do the RUBS for you. You guys work on. That's a lot. Yeah, but I mean, you say then you can charge less for that too.
With water, and then we're getting $12 a month per unit for insurance.
So with RUBS too, it's important if no one in your market has RUBS and you go ahead and try to implement RUBS, that's going to be a problem. But if everyone else around you is doing RUBS and then you're not when you purchase it, that's a valuable opportunity.
Only caveat I would say to that is we don't have a lot of RUBS in the market where we're at, but there are no new builds. There is nothing new coming in the market and no plans for anything new. And the market is really, really tight for rentals. So we were able to add RUBS because of that.
Nice.
And you're 100% occupied
And we're
with a
100%
waiting
with a
list.
waiting
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we just did a test on one of the units that was upgraded beyond the others and added $30 a month to rent for that.
What's your delinquency?
Our delinquency, we have very close to zero delinquency. Right now,
We have one
this
individual,
month, we have one
so we don't have
individual out of
that
the 8 that's delinquent. And he's
Gary,
on
did that
a
help a little
payment
bit?
plan. Yeah. So we're in good shape.
All right, so you guys picked number 2, right?
Yeah, Mike, we had another question.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, okay.
No, you're good.
So would an example of that be like charging for laundry or something? Is that an example of a rub?
No, different. So water, sewer, trash, electricity, right, your main utilities are really what's included in the building. And so if you don't have an individual meter, so if you're ever rent an apartment, you might have to go set up your own electricity. A lot of master meter units, meaning the whole building is measured by one bill instead of each apartment. They just take that bill and divide it and go, hey, your bill is $40.
We just instituted a new program in our system, in ours. We have, each of our 8 units has hookups for washers and dryers. We also have a laundry room, but the same company that does our laundry room, we've gone into a contract with them to offer units to each of the individual apartments. Their charge is $33 per month per set, and our charge is $50.
Good.
So you guys
that's
make-
what we call a value add. So you've done something, you've been able to offer a service to the renter that
If you
brings
think
in.
about it, what you're gonna spend on laundry per month, just in feeding coins into the machine and waiting so that nobody steals your
Yeah, plus
laundry.
you can't leave the.
The $50 is worth it.
So
That's happened to me before. People steal their laundry. I don't know
Man. So in unit laundry, definitely a good value add. The rugs is an opportunity, so right, charging basically a flat fee for your to your tenants for extra rent. Operations, improving operations is a huge one. So you guys talked about contracts. There's obviously utility help. So like our deal too, same with trash. A couple thousand. I wish it was 7,000. Nice. A couple $1,000 we're going to reduce by just changing out the trash cans, the dumpster sizes. It's kind of a no-brainer. So those are all sounds like little things, but all of those add more bottom line dollars. So you have revenue, you have revenue, you have expenses. What's left is your operating income, net operating income. You'll hear it called NOI. That's the profit that's left. And then after that, you pay your mortgage. Don't forget about the mortgage. You got to pay those guys, unless you don't have a mortgage, but most of us do. Pay the mortgage, and then what's left is cash flow, and that cash flow goes back out to the investors. That's really, you do that every month, and your goal is, again, raise the rent, raise the income as much as possible. Manage expenses, and produce cash flow.
Now, Mike, is it every month that you have to do distributions?
You don't have to. So we chose to, we haven't started distributions. We're going to start distributions the end of next month. So we wanted to wait a few months to make sure everything kind of eased in. There's a couple of tenants were like, I paid the old man company the rent. No, you didn't, right? So we had a few our PM team went out there, literally knocked on the door and was like, hey, where's your check? So it was great to have a good team, but also, yeah, we're going to start next month, monthly. A lot of folks do quarterly though. So quarterly and monthly is what you'll typically expect.
We do quarterly.
Hey, Mike, I have a question. So I was looking at a deal today, and they're talking about cashier's checks and money orders. And I guess that's a question for you too, but are you trying to force people into more electronic payments?
Only electronic payments.
Now it's only electronic.
Only electronic. So they can get on the website and pay their bill. That's one way. They can you remind me of the system name? Whips. So I can go to like a grocery store with my payroll check, and they could like process it at Walmart or whatever, and they'll pay the rent.
Yeah.
It's kind of
And
cool.
COVID was a great example for that.
To
Like
help
that
everybody.
helped.
So
We were
that's where it's
already
gone.
80% there, and then that really pushed, it really.
And then the way it's set up, it pops in, it has the unit number and their name, the whole deal, so there's no, you're not searching for money.
Right.
Nope, it just goes right in. It's already coded properly. So between those two, I think like 80% of our tenants pay online anyway. The other 20 try to find ways to bring us a check. I'm like, nope, you got to do it this way. So it's been pretty good, pretty beneficial.
If you want to boost that 80%, offer a discount on the rent for paying electronically.
First month we did that, and it helped.
Right.
It helped.
It means you just naturally raise your rent some.
Sometimes you have to sit down with people and just explain it, and I think that's one of the things. You want your property management company to be very versatile, like delinquency. The reason there's no delinquency is that property manager knows everybody, and they're talking to people, and they're making sure, even during COVID, like our delinquency didn't really have an uptick in most of the areas, just because you're in front of people. And if it's a payment issue and they're trying to figure that out, sometimes you have to sit down with them. Like they're not technically savvy, or they get confused, or they punch one thing wrong. So a lot of times we'll have them come to the office, or we'll, to bring your computer, bring your phone, whatever you're going to do, and work through it with them. So it helps.
Do you have a specific personality test that you give your property managers? That's like a unique ability.
Oh,
that person.
absolutely.
It's like a polite bulldog, right?
Exactly. Well, it helps if your on-site property manager, like you said, is hands-on, knows everybody. We had one tenant that changed jobs, and she wouldn't have a paycheck for a period of time. But she, we were willing to work with her to make sure that she could, continue, and that we didn't have a problem with that as long as her promise came to fruition. And once people know that you're willing to do those kinds of things, you don't let them take advantage of you, but I try to work with them, and that just builds a stronger relationship, and they're more likely to renew. We also have a program with our on-site that she gets an extra little spiff with the renewals.
Absolutely, we pay more for a renewal than we do for a new lease, because think of the money that you save with a renewal. You're not turning that unit, it's right, absolutely incentivized for renewals versus,
That's right. Yeah, a lot of the strategies are around, removing tenants and bringing new tenants in, which is good, but there's a cost, a huge cost to that, right? Because that unit usually needs to be turned over. And so if you can keep that tenant in place, raise the rents, you'll be in good shape. One of our tenants lost their job actually just last week. And so our PM met with them, told them the story, and she's like, I'll tell you what, let me help you out. They went together, they filled out the form to get assistance. So we're gonna get paid directly. She's covered. She was like, is there a way to get part of the rent covered? It was like $800. The assistant's gonna pay the whole thing. All right, so proactive PM took action. Tenant called for help. Tenant really didn't have to do a lot. So that was pretty awesome. Didn't disturb us in any bit, right? So collections are doing awesome. Yes, sir.
My class, maybe a question. So CalCap's a great management company. I think he's rated this.
and I'm gonna pay him later.
Evictions, we're gonna, inability to evict somebody. That's now been postponed until October.
October, yes.
So you're running still almost no delinquency?
Not no delinquents, but we didn't have much of an uptick. Again, we sat down with people, and even though there's a moratorium, people still we didn't allow them to take advantage of that, right? And you still communicate with them. You ask them what their situation is. You ask them, can you pay something? What can you pay? Even with a moratorium, they couldn't pay nothing, right? You had to, because they were getting help from the government, right? And so, you have TV box and new furniture show up and you're not paying your rent. We made it clear, we're seeing this, we're talking to you about it, this is your alternative. And when you have crime, when you have other things, noise, when you have things that you could typically evict or have issues for, if they're coupled with that, there was ways that we were able to,
exactly. I was gonna say, it doesn't mean you can't evict.
Exactly.
There just means that everybody thought, eviction is directly related to COVID.
We were still,
but if they're a hoarder and they're creating an unsafe situation.
Or if they're coming across the property with a samurai sword.
Exactly.
There's ways you can get people gone.
That's frowned upon?
What?
That's frowned upon?
Yeah, that's frowned upon.
They're worth $7,000 a month in the behavioral health program, so you can make money. Throw them in a different unit.
I feel like
the paperwork too, we came alongside a lot of residents. I think we recovered over $500,000 worth of monies for, the programs in different areas for our owners, through those programs. Some of these people just, they mentally can't figure it out, and you have to come along with somebody and say, look, we'll help you with paperwork. And it's just overwhelming for them, or what have you, and, to your point, you have a polite bulldog, and, they figure out what you can work with and who you need to help, right?
Yeah, I think the right team is going to do just like the owners would want to do, right? They're going to do the heavy lifting. And, we were fortunate in our deal, really no delinquency other than, again, a couple of job losses, but within 30 days. 0 to 30 is, yes, it's delinquent, but it's cleared, right? And all the other deals that we underwrote, we asked those same questions, like, what's the process been like? Tell me about, folks, choosing to just close up and not do anything. How do you address them? And really, 1 in 150, 200 units, like, that's pretty good. Regardless of what you hear in the media, like, people aren't paying rents, and if you're in California, that's impossible. But like here in New Mexico, like New Mexico's a blue state, but you know what? It was really, really good because proactive folks doing the work on the ground.
I think that's twofold. You have proactive property managers who said, okay, you lost your job, it's COVID related. Here's 5 resources. Here's who you contact. Here's how you apply. You show them the steps, you give them the resources, and let them take advantage of that. And if they do nothing, you can go before a judge and say, but judge, I showed them how to get all the money. They took no action. And we know one property manager who successfully evicted people during COVID because they weren't paying and didn't take any action to get rental assistance. But number 2, I think you have a lot of people, from what I'm hearing from a lot of people I talk to, a lot of people are current because they realize if I'm out in the street, good luck finding another unit. Our market is tight. Our vacancy is essentially 0 because you're just turning units. And you've got rentals for the first time in Phoenix history. It says, give us your highest and best. You give us, compete.
Yeah, there's a bidding war. There's a bidding war.
Bidding wars on apartment rents now. So I think a lot of the renters, for whatever their motivations may be, are inclined to try and stay because it's too painful, too expensive to find something else.
And a lot of folks don't factor in the cost of actually moving too. Like, good luck finding a moving truck right now and all that other stuff. So just to go back to this, I think we'll beat this to death, right? But here's the 3 Ps. In order, if you were to pick a reason and to invest, which one are you going to pick?
People, plant, property.
Right? So if this works, maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. No, just kidding. Yeah, you got it right. And so I like some of these questions. I think someone asked me earlier, right? I'm a lazy guy or girl. I'm just going to look at the numbers. I'm going to look at, this looks good. I'm going to invest. But really, if you get to know the sponsor a little bit, look at some of their last deals. We had a few of our investors on the last deal actually ask for referrals. We're like, cool, no problem. So we got on the phone, got a hold of a couple other investors, say, hey, would this be okay? They talked, and it was good, right? So build that know, like, and trust component. And I think also, just because you're passive doesn't mean you shouldn't do your homework. You should still do your homework. You're still putting your hard-earned capital to work. You're trusting someone else. And if your operator can't answer some of the questions about the market, the growth of employment, the good business plan, what happens if occupancy drops to 80%? What do you have to do? Those are all really important questions that I would want to know when I invested in my hard money. Those are the same questions I asked, right? It's really, really important. Yes.
As an operator, I think it's really important to keep in touch with the local newspaper if you're investing out of state, and the Chamber of Commerce, and provide articles and things like that to your investors so that they know that you're watching that market. They know that you're fully invested in that market.
Yeah, it's really good. It's perfect. Questions about this? Something that isn't on here, maybe? No, anything?
Hey, Mike?
Yeah.
You never answered
Yeah,
lady's question about IRR or.
You're not trying to get it, I'm trying to avoid that.
I was not. So this is, and there's smarter people in this room than me. So here's my explanation of IRR. Have you heard of average return?
I think so.
Right. So if you invest $100,000 with me and I give you $50,000 back, right? You earn 50%. Yeah. The longer it takes me to do that, the lower. So your average return is 50%, right? If I do that in 1 year, in 2 years, I cut that in half. It's 25%. Right. But the longer it takes, is where IRR comes in. It just factors time in. So if I return the same 50,000 over 7 years versus 50,000 in 2 years, right? There's an average return that's easy to calculate. IRR is a little harder because it takes into fact time. That's really the best way I can explain it. If anyone can do better, please speak up. But just factoring in time.
That's a good explanation.
It's about the simplest way I can do it. So our job is to return your money as soon as we can. The longer it takes, that same amount of money is technically worth less, right? Because it takes a little bit more time. It's not like it factors inflation or anything, it's a time value.
There's a concept
The
of
loss of
time
opportunity.
value.
Time value of money.
The longer it goes, the loss of
100,000
opportunity.
today is not worth 100,000 in 5 years. There's opportunity cost. There's time value.
Was that good? Okay. What else we got? I think that was actually it. Just opening up, comments, complaints. Yeah. Yes, sir.
I'd like to hear from you, New Mexico boy, and you two again on exit strategy going into the deal.
Sure. You go first?
No, you go.
So we projected 7 years was our hold, which is probably a little longer hold than most maybe syndicators will put out there. But for a couple of reasons, we wanted to make sure we hit that return number. We also wanted to hedge. You know, if we're heading towards a cliff, none of us can see the cliff. What would happen if our plan was a 3-year plan and in year 3 we hit the cliff, right? So we said let's budget and project 7 years. With everything the way it's going now, once we've bought the property, rents are again. We're going to hit our. We said $200 is our average rent increase over 36 months, right? We're going to hit that by the end of this year, right? So we're a couple of years ahead of our pro forma. So if we say 5-year exit is great, if someone comes to us in year 4, we're gonna, and it's a good value, right? We'll do it. But something to think about, which is very different than single family. So we signed up, we bought a note, right? We went and borrowed money. When you borrow money, you're also committing to paying interest for a set period of time. So our loan is a 7-year note, right? So we aligned our exit plan with our financing, which is important to do. You can buy a 10-year note. You can't do a 30-year mortgage on a commercial property, by the way. So we have interest that we owe because the bank takes our loan, packages it up, and sells it to another group, and they make money on that. So if we sell it short in year 3, the interest from year 4, 5, 6, and 7 are due. And so it can look like 2 things. It can look like yield maintenance, or it can look like a prepay. Yield maintenance, a little complicated to explain, but basically it's our rate minus what the treasury rate is. So if you ever look at the treasury rate, I think it's at 172-ish. It's the difference between those 2 numbers. So our rate's 4.1 minus 1.72, whatever that math is, times the number of years we have left. So it's a lot of money. So a lot of deals right now are being called loan assumptions because they bought them 2 years ago, right? Super crazy prices. They can exit, but they're going to pay $2, $3, $4 million in prepayments or yield maintenance payments to get out of the deal. And so that's ugly for that operator, even though he's going to make probably a good amount of money. So for our plan is we went down the prepay route. Same concept, but we stepped down. So it's in year 1, it's 5%. By the time we get to year 5, it's 1%. So it's 5-4. Usually it goes 5-5, 4-4, 3-2-1. Right. So we'll pay 2-3%. It'll be about $70,000 that we'll pay. So what? We'll make a couple $1 million. It'll be great.
Yeah, Mike, we are doing. I'm involved with a deal where the prepay was at 1.3 million.
Yeah.
So the buyer paid it, and then we get close to closing, and the seller forgot to read his note in more detail, and he couldn't sell it.
Because it was more than that?
So we had to assume it.
Ah.
So they got the $1.3 million back, but then they had to assume, and then they had to get another loan with it. It's very confusing, but they're very good buyers, so they'll figure it out. But yeah, I mean, the buyers wanted it so bad that they didn't. What's that? Yeah. So the buyers wanted the deal, so they were willing to pay it because they knew over time if they paid the prepay, they would be able to make the math still work really.
Eric, what was that called? That lock? It was lockdown something? What was that term called?
Yeah, you called it, what did you call it, the lockdown? Yeah. I never heard of that.
Yeah, like you can't sell within the first couple of years. Yeah.
Right. But it was fully assumable, it was no big thing, I mean, they'll figure it out, I mean, they'll actually probably get a little bit more of a discount, the seller still. The poor seller had already bought another property, ready to sell with all this money, and all this happened, he's like, oh my God. And you know what? They're both very sophisticated. They figured it out. They're gonna make it work. It's fine, but it was kind of interesting.
We had a deal, we ended up not buying, it was actually our first deal, we went all the way to due diligence, like the last day we could get our money back, we walked away, but that was a loan assumption. And pretty gnarly from like negotiating with the lender and understanding what's required. But that seller was almost a $2.2 million prepay, or not prepay, that would have been the penalty. So we said, no, we'll assume it. And so the good news when you assume it, it's a lower price, right? Because we have to deal with the debt. We were stuck with the debt for 7 or 8 more years. And so it was actually worked into our underwriting to be no problem, right? But what the sellers did is they're like, well, we took advantage of the first 2 years because it was interest only, right? As soon as the principal kicked in, they're like, oh shit, our cash flow went to crap, right? And they were not good operators, so they had a lot of expenses and all kinds of good things. So we saw the value in trying to fix some of their operations and come out with positive cash flow, even though it was a loan assumption. So a little complicated, but definitely don't shy away from it. Look into it. It could be viable.
Eric did both of your guys' loan on both your deals, right?
Yes. Yep.
And did I know Bridge has gotten really aggressive now. Did you guys do bridge financing or no?
No.
I was guessing Eric probably didn't structure it that way.
No, but I mean, I think I was talking with someone earlier. I think I was talking with Eric about that. So bridge financing, even community banks, like they've gotten really aggressive. So you don't have to do Fannie, Freddie. Fannie and Freddie, and Eric really likes Fannie, right? And Freddie, he really likes Freddie. Pretty small balance. But it's because it's reliable. We know we can execute. But sometimes you want to get creative and really get in and kind of find value. A lot of it has to do with what's your interest rate versus what's your cap rate. There's guys, that's how they do the math. They look at cap rate and they look, you know what cap rate is? I'm gonna put you on the spot.
Yeah.
Who can explain cap rate? Anyone?
The cash flow divided by the property value.
That's the number. Yep. So the other way to think about it is it's the return on your investment if you pay cash, right? So we're in a 3% market right now in Phoenix, right? It used to be 4, New Mexico's in the 6s, 5s and 6s, Mississippi's and 6s.
Well, depends on where you are.
Basically, what it tells you is how much you have to pay for the property to get a return.
Yeah.
So if you go to San Francisco, where you know everything's expensive, your cap rate's going to be really small.
Right. And so that's
the easy way to think about it.
That's right. So it's just a correlation between the income, and we're talking about the income, and the value that you pay.
That's part of the reason we go to secondary and tertiary market.
Yeah, on the flip side is your appreciation is potentially less because the higher the number, right, the less the value is technically. So it's just a correlation, and if you get down the road and you need help, just reach out. It's easy.
So if we all had a crystal ball, we all buy at 7 and sell at 4.
That's
So
right.
that would be a really good thing.
That'd be great.
I haven't done that crystal ball yet.
As you're building your legacy, selling is still an option for you? or-
Well, selling it in the end.
Oh, yeah.
We have a 5, a 7, and a 10-year. We started out with 10-year. Numbers worked at 10. As we went through and did more analysis, and as our property management team came in and did an analysis of the market, we were able to bring it down to 5-year exit plan to reach our goals. So, you know, we're good anywhere between 5 and 10 years, and looks like we're gonna hit our 5 years pretty quickly. Quickly, yeah.
Yeah.
What population is the city you guys invest in?
Really low population.
So Vicksburg proper is 29,000 people. Then county that they're in, which Vicksburg in about a 10-mile radius is about 90% of the population is 49,000 people. So it's a smaller market, and that was actually an issue with our investors in raising the actual funds, because we had to prove that it was a viable market, that there was good job growth there, that it had a long, track record of performing well. And
Plus, one of the things that the lender was concerned with was the balance of our market, the balance of renters there. If you're too heavy loaded in one direction or another, they're concerned that if that segment of the market was to leave, then you'd be up the creek without a paddle.
How many units was it again?
80
units. 80. Okay.
And the largest contingent of individuals that we have there are the Army Corps of Engineers, but it's only 8% of our portfolio of renters. So So that's something that, you know, we could sustain.
And that's a word of warning to, say you go and buy something in Texas, and you have 85% oil people in your complex, that is a big risk. That's dangerous.
Have to just,
Then,
you have to
Amy,
look-
do you do rent audits, is that?
Yeah, we do,
So that's part of your
during the
due
due diligence, we do a lease audit, and so it literally will show you the demographic and where everybody works, it's really cool. And then obviously unit by unit inspection and big systems, but yeah, lease audit is done at your due diligence, so you should be able to take a look, you know, deep dive into who's living in that community, so you can be sure to.
Well, did we answer your question?
No, when you're.
He didn't get to ask it, so go ahead.
It's about a cap rate. So when you're underwriting, how do you determine how conservative you are in, 5-7 years down the line? How the cap rate's gonna.
I have a crystal ball in my closet.
There's just the other way on this one.
Yes.
Very, very conservative. Matter of fact, the market's at 7.2 is what we bought it at, and he did an exit at
That's
7.5. And
So I actually said that the market's gonna get softer.
It's softer,
If
and
it
it
goes-
still works.
Yeah, if it goes to 7, that's when we make our 24%. The closest big market that is there is Jackson, and Jackson is already pushing into the low 6s. So if we get a little push from Jackson, and maybe that goes to 6.5 or 6.25 or something like that, then that's really a big case for us. So it was just looking and saying, all right, I know what I'm buying it at. I'm gonna guess and say, I'm gonna look at both sides of it. I'm gonna say that if it gets a little softer, are we gonna still be able to stay in the deal? If it gets better, of course, we're gonna be able to stay in the deal. So.
Then you also have to look at what's gonna attract your investors. If you're gonna make enough money, even if the market softens, to attract your investors, you've got an absolutely great deal. If you can exit and still pay your investors.
So sensitivity analysis.
Yeah, so that's what I was gonna say. If you look it up, there's folks that say you can add 10 to 12 basis points per year.
Yep.
So per year of hold, right? So if I hold for 5 years, I add 0.5% or 50 basis points. That's the same. We did the same math, right? I think we added seven basis points. We went from 6.5 to 7.2, right? So our exit is 7.2 and it hits our returns. Hope it compresses and we'll look like heroes.
We were not high bidder on the property. So we actually bought it for less than what other people were offering. But we had worked with the broker, he understood what our capabilities were. He knew that we were a solid deal, that we were gonna get the property closed and we were not gonna have any issues with it.
As a longtime broker, you don't always sell it to the highest bidder.
That's a really good point, right?
Who's gonna close?
Who's gonna have certainty of close? That's really.
Brokers do not like a waste time.
What determines your certainty of close? What do you measure? Like the certainty.
Well, I really like to play poker, and so my gut is very strong. Who's not? But that's also part of the job too. You get a sense of
Conversationally.
who's for real
Yeah.
and who's not.
Yeah.
Who's a real buyer and who's not. That's pretty. Once you've been around the block a little bit,
Even on a property management, degree, like people come in to talk to us and you can tell if they've ever done a deal or not. And even if they haven't done a deal, so I gotta tell the story because I have an example, he had never done a deal. And I have the scale of newbies, right? Okay, are they neon green? Because they're green, right? Are they neon green or are they like hunter green? Are they Kelly green? Are they some green? And when I got done talking to Mike, I'm like, this guy's hunter green, and he knows what he's talking about. He's done a lot of underwriting, and you could just tell, And then last week, I had a meeting with somebody, and I said they weren't even green; they were blue and yellow before they even got to the green. It was but it's just you're well versed. You can talk. You can speak. You can. You don't need to know everything, but I think the other thing is you've got good partners. You've got a good sponsor. You have people that where he started, you've got a team and you're coming in and you know what you're doing. So it's not even that you closed something before, but you have people around you that have, you know?
And Mike also had strong business experience.
Yeah.
Or
And
one
business
is
acumen.
closing is you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
Right.
So you need to have strong sponsors or strong backers.
And Laird has strong business acumen,
Yeah.
and she was an escrow officer, so there's things that
Yeah.
people that you're gonna say, okay, they may not know this, or they may not know how to calculate CapEx or whatever, but they're a safe bet. They're somebody I would bet on to get the deal done.
And I was gonna add, like, from a broker perspective, right, we got through a couple of best and finals, what do they ask for in a best and final? Your best sharpened pencil of your offer, right? So your letter of intent is your offer letter, a bio, right? If you just said it's just Angelo, he's never done a deal, that's not gonna get very far, it's gonna get thrown in the trash. So our bios are included in our offers when we put them in, right? So it's our sponsorship team, not their balance sheet necessarily, but just looking at their experience, we'll speak to their balance sheet. And prior ownership of other properties really helps, right? So that's part of it. And then if you're in Phoenix, if you're in Texas, Dallas, right? It's a check for hard money, right? If you're buying a 100-unit deal at 200 grand, that's $20 million. You better have $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 hard on day one.
Yeah.
Day one. That means it's non-refundable, right? It's gone.
No contingency.
No contingency is gone. So that's how you determine a serious buyer here. Again, one of the reasons we said the sandbox is a little competitive. We're going to go to New Mexico. And we didn't have to do that. We still had to put money down, but it was 60 days or was our due diligence process. And after that, our money went non-refundable. So those are all different components to look at. Somebody had a question. Yeah.
What does a refinance look like in a syndicated deal, or even using hard money on like that size of a unit?
So two possible components for your question. Yeah. So the hard money is not a loan. It's when we say the money goes hard, that's taking our deposit, our earnest money deposit. And it goes hard on day one means it goes non-refundable, right? So if it's 60K or 100K.
If you close, they'll credit you for that, but if you don't close,
lose
it's gone.
Yeah. So normally when you buy a house, right, you have 30 days to do your diligence, right? Commercial properties, 30, 40, 60 days. Usually you put money down and then you have time. If you find something that's like.
So it's essentially just your earnest money down.
Your earnest money goes hard. So that's the terminology. It goes hard on day one. That is the only way you're going to do anything over even 50 units, it seems like, right? I don't know. Mm-hmm. Right? Everything is pretty crazy here. So just be prepared. That's the kind of
Phoenix, yes.
What's that?
Yeah.
Phoenix, Tucson.
Yeah.
Even in Tucson. The second part.
As a broker, I would never recommend you do that unless you're sophisticated.
Exactly.
Unless you're experienced, I would never, I would make you sign something if you were going to put 100,000 into something hard like that. I would say, look, I'm writing it down, telling you not to do this. You need to sign it. So you gotta know you're gonna close.
The second part
You
of
have to know you're gonna close, but I will also say, people are doing, that's how deals are getting done now, $200,000, $300,000, $400,000
right.
hard.
So you have to be sophisticated. And you have to be somebody who with 300,000 doesn't really hurt that bad if you lose it.
Yeah.
So you can't play that.
That would hurt
Find
me.
another market.
Before you go to Mississippi,
You don't get our testers, you do as a residential purchaser yourself.
Right.
I mean, they consider as an investor, you know what you're doing, you don't need our help, you're on your own.
And generally, the sellers are the ones who generate the contract, the PSA, purchase and sale agreement, and that's usually always slanted heavily to the seller. So then you have to come back in with your attorney, and so you do this whole dance. So, but it's not resident.
I was just going to say that hard money is not typically investor money. It shouldn't be investor money.
Yeah, I do hard money as like a loan.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. So that's different, right? So that hopefully that clarified that.
It did.
And then the refinance, separate piece is like if we go into year 3 or 4 and maybe interest rates drop and we have an opportunity to pull some cash out. A lot of folks do cash out refis, especially here because they bought 2 years ago. They can pull out a couple $1 million and then keep going and return a bunch of capital.
So how does that look on the investor standpoint when you refi out? Do you since you pulled out this cash, do you give them a return and they're not done, or do you keep them in the?
So it depends on the deal is structured, right? The deal can be structured very differently. You can if you can refinance and return all of capital, right? Then, and the deal is stated in there's a piece of contract called a PPM, private placement memorandum, right? Because we're selling securities. So that's the agreement between you, the investor, and us, the operator. But it'll say in there, if there's a refinance event, that we could return your capital and you're out of the deal. I wouldn't do that. I think it's kind of messed up, but you could do that. The other way is if we did do that, now it's infinite returns.
Right.
Because
exactly.
you still maintain whatever that share of ownership is, right? So if it was $1 million that we had to raise and you were 100K of it, 10% is your ownership share, right? Then you could get the same percentage of return forever, but all of your money is back. That's the ideal, amazing place to be, right? But a lot of times it's 60, 70, 80% gets returned. So it just depends on the math. Because there's also a cost to refinance. Remember we talked about that prepay? That prepay is still there. Not just closing costs, that prepay is still there in a refi. It doesn't go away. Good question, sir.
Mike, a question I probably should know the answer to, and I have no idea. When you get syndication and you've got general partners and other partners, can you set it up as like a tick so you can do when you sell it and they can do a 1031? How does that work?
So TIC is a different structure. Sorry, go ahead, Mike.
No, you're right. So TIC is a different structure,
but can you do that so when you sell it, somebody can do a 1031?
Potentially. It really depends on how it's structured. So in our deal, we didn't take any 1031 money, but if we did, so if Chris, I'm sorry. If Chris says, hey, I have 100 grand in 1031 money, does that qualify? It could. He would come in as an LP, but he would actually end up being a part owner, and it's called tenant in common, TIC, right? So it's a different piece of paperwork. We have to tell everyone else that's just an LP that just has shares.
You could do it with a syndication.
Yes, you could. That's simple answer. Yes, you could. But it depends. There's an asterisk.
You also segregate the deals so that you're trying to eliminate the need for the 1031.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, right, you exit out, you have so much depreciation banked from the way we run the property that it ideally could be a very limited tax penalty upon sale.
One of the big selling points, because we're in such a small market with our property, one of the biggest selling points was the cost segregation. We went with the cost segregation company early on during the due diligence, and he came back with a report that said 51%. So if you invested $100,000, your cost segregation portion would be 51,000. So, and you can use that over, I believe, 7 years.
Did that go over what people said?
That's a Cindy question.
That's over.
That's why we have an account on the team.
What else?
Here, I have a selfish question. So I'm doing a 1031 into one of our deals. So with the cost segregation study, does that, since it's already depreciated, should it depreciate whenever we do sell it? Because I know with 1031, whenever you sell a 1031 and you get your money back, you do have to pay capital gains. It's just pushed back. So with the cost segregation, does that kill that? Or
Let
anyone
me
else?
say one thing, you never touch your money in a 1031. A qualified exchanger gets it and then it goes into the next deal. That's how you protect
Yeah, you
yourself
never
from
touch
taxes.
Yeah.
Of course. Sorry, go ahead, Gabe.
Yeah, but does the cost segregation kind of cut having to keep on pushing it back?
So
if that makes sense.
There's different ways, and maybe RL will have more color, but if you take, instead of doing a 1031, you could take all your proceeds, right, in the bank or your lender, we're gonna hold 40% of taxes. By applying that capital to the deal and you do the cost segregation, so there's a depreciation benefit and there's a tax benefit. The question is this depreciation benefit enough to cover the penalties, right? And that's where the math comes in. In new construction, so we're building new apartments because it's too expensive to buy old ones, there's a massive amount of depreciation that you get up front. And so there's a possibility that your depreciation loss can outweigh your tax penalty or your tax that you owe. We have to do the math. I don't know. I think what Todd was alluding to is if you defer it through a qualified intermediary, a QI, that you never touch that money. So it goes from one deal to the next deal to the next deal.
If you touch it, you pay taxes.
You touch it, you pay taxes.
The most beautiful thing about it ever, though, is Grandpa can start with his little condo, build it up into the mall, and have a $30 million tax liability, and then die, hand it over to his heirs, and they start at zero tax.
Yeah, the basis goes to.
So it's in there, you would
Tax today, maybe not next year, yeah.
To check it.
It's called set up basis.
No.
Yes, sir.
One thing, when you explain the syndication 1031, kind of cloudy from my point of view. When you're doing a 1031, you can only go from like asset to like asset. And a syndication, unless you're in a GP or doing a tenants in common, you're not doing like for like. You're doing real estate for a piece of paper as an investor. That's why you have to do the tenants in common. Okay? Because if you try investing, just as an LP, you'll lose your 10%.
You have your taxable event at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I didn't explain that, thank you for clarifying. That's why I was saying it sets it up as a tick.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
If you have large, 1031 money, you're most likely gonna do an LP, a partnership. You're not gonna mess with syndication at all. And you're just gonna find some good partners and do the deal.
1031 going away or like getting limited to under 500K or something?
So there's all kinds of talks at legislative level of it changing, going away. I don't want to bring politics into the conversation, so who knows? But if I was in a 1031 position or potential, move fast. That's all I can say.
Mike, the thing I would say on that is that the lobby for realtors in Washington is very well funded and very strong. So messing with it, whenever politicians say they're gonna mess with something like that, I'm like, whatever.
But it's also,
We'll see what happens.
You're not only dealing with the realtors, you're dealing with the farmers and ranchers who pass their properties down through generations.
And just think of the realtors, everybody, millions across the nation, there's a fee in all of those that goes to the lobby. So it's very well funded.
Yeah. We're I think, almost at 8 o'clock, right?
Yeah, 8 o'clock.
So I don't know what time we have to get out of here, but.
9 o'clock.
Yeah, so that's all we have to kind of say. If there's anyone that has questions, comments, again, complaints, please ask. I'll throw some cards up on the table. I don't know if you guys bring some cards. Yep, so we'll throw some cards for Larry and Sherry. Our cards will be up here. Any questions, let us know. We're working on, if you have any interest in what we're doing in the future, so I mentioned we're doing some development deals here. I can happily share a little bit about what that looks like, but it's still kind of down the road, but we're